this inspirational 50-50 tea time. We were planning to open with a fantastic 50-50 video, but given the streaming problems that this can present, we've decided to send it to you all by email, so that I hope you will take a look at sometime later. It's amazing to have so many of you here today. Hannah, how many people have we got? 46, 47. That's fantastic. Just the kind of number we're expecting, around 50. This month is Lesbian, Gay, Bi, Trans History Month. So this event is intended not only to inspire women to stand, but especially LGBT women. By the end of this afternoon, we hope that everyone here will understand how we can all help them progress in politics. Maureen Carhoon was the first openly lesbian MP, and she sadly died on the 2nd of February this year. She was a fantastic campaigner for women's rights. In 1975, she introduced the Balance of the Sexes Bill, calling for there to be an equal number of men and women on all public bodies. Sadly, it didn't become law. She also campaigned for creche facilities at party conferences so that women could participate. She was a woman ahead of her time, and we need more like her in elected office. At Westminster, 55 of our MPs are openly lesbian, gay, or bi, but 80% of them are men. Only 11 are women. 50-50 is an inclusive, intersectional campaign here to support all kinds of women progress in politics in a kind and inclusive way, including lesbian, bi, and trans women. Being a campaign for greater inclusion, we are inclusive. Sadly, the concept of LGBT inclusion, and particularly trans inclusion, is controversial. There are 32 million women in the UK. We are a major force for good. The trans community accounts for fewer than 500,000 people. It is marginalised and vilified. Like most women, very few trans women are interested in politics, but those that are brave enough to consider standing for election, wanting to bring their life experiences to our councils and parliaments, wishing to represent their constituents, deserve our support. There has never been a trans MP. Parliament is meant to be a representative institution, but currently men outnumber women by more than 2 to 1 in the corridors of power. There is plenty of evidence that diversity leads to better decision making, and we want all kinds of women to play an equal part in running the country and planning the future. 50-50 are taking action with our Ask Her to Stand and Sign Up to Stand programs to encourage women who have political aspirations. We want them to sign up to stand via the 50-50 website so that we can offer them a network of support. When women click Sign Up to Stand, we do 4 things. We send them their own interactive personal political profile. We allocate them a 50-50 buddy. We invite them to weekly party-specific bite-sized meetings. And if they're from a minority group, we offer additional bespoke support. For example, for BAME women, this Monday evening, we're starting special Connect and Reflect sessions. If LGBT women would like us to offer such sessions, please let us know, send us an email. Around 2,000 women have now come to sign up to stand with us, and we are helping them take the next step into politics. And it works. At the last election, 50 of the women who stood were part of 50-50, 20% from minority groups, and 9 went on to win seats at Westminster. But this is not good enough. Only 12 extra women won seats in the Commons in 2019. At this rate, it will take 40 years for women to have equal seats and equal say. I will be dead and my kids will be old. We need 105 more women to win seats. So we're here this afternoon to inspire women to stand. With local elections coming up, there are some great opportunities for women to get involved in politics this year, and 50-50 is here to help them. We're honoured to have some fantastic MPs with us today and some great representatives of the LGBT community. But before handing over to Emma, who's going to host this afternoon's event, we would just like to get to know you better. So I'm going to ask Hannah, who's running the tech this afternoon, to put up a poll. And if you wouldn't mind just sort of filling this in and letting us know whether you're already a member of a political party, whether you're active in your local community, or if you started a campaign, or you feel strongly that you'd like to be involved but not sure how. Answer those questions. And then the second question, have you already joined our Sign Up to Stand campaign? Yes or no? How are we getting on with that, Hannah?
We have almost 80% of people doing the poll now.
Great, fantastic. Thanks, everybody. Should we go live with it, Hannah?
Yes, I think we'll put in the poll now.
Okay, thanks. Fantastic, 75% of you are members of a political party. That is a really good start. Yeah, really important to be active in your local community. A third of you are. Oh, 60%, 59% of, oh no, I'm getting it the wrong way around. 40% have come to sign up to stand, but 60% haven't yet. I'm urging you to sign up to stand today. I mean, I'm really hoping that this event will inspire you to do that. So we've got some really politically engaged people on the call this afternoon. So it's wonderful to have you with us. Great to learn more about all of you. We've received some wonderful questions ahead of time and chosen as many as possible. The live audience can answer questions too with the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. Now I'm going to hand over to Emma, who sits on our diversity committee and leads on LGBT matters, to host the questions and the discussion. Thanks so much for listening to me, and over to you, Emma.
Thank you, Frances. That was awesome. So yeah, I'm a diversity ambassador at 50/50, leading on LGBT issues, and I'm so happy we're doing this today. I myself am a gay woman, and I'm married and have kids. And as my kids are getting older, it becomes more and more important to me, or real to me, how much the world and our laws don't work or understand me and my family. And the only way I think we can address that is by getting more LGBT representation, and particularly LGBT women into Parliament. So I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by so many great guests. So I'm just going to introduce you to everyone on our panel now, and then we will fly straight into some questions. So we've got Nia Griffith, MP. Nia, if you'd like to raise your hand for everyone, who is the Shadow Secretary of State for Wales and Labour MP for Llanelli. In 2017, she was named on the pink list of leading Welsh LGBT figures. And then we have Christine Jardine, MP, if you'd like to raise your hand, Christine, lovely, who is MP for Edinburgh West, and previously she's been the Lib Dem spokesperson for Women and Equalities. And then joining us, we have Rona Mackay, MSP, for Strath Kelvin and Bearsden. And she has been in Hollywood since the parliamentary elections in May 2016 and sits on the LGBTQI committee as well. We have Sue Pascoe. Sue, if you raise your hand, who was the Conservative Party's first trans woman candidate in a European election and was among PwC's 50 inspirational people of 2019. And then we have Mandu Reid, if you raise your hand, lovely, who is the leader of the UK Women's Equality Party. She's also currently the prospective candidate for Mayor of London, which hopefully will take place this May. And she's also the first openly bi female leader of a major UK political party. And last but not least, we've got Robin White. Robin, if you want to raise your hand and say hi, who is the first barrister at the Employment and Discrimination Bar to transition. She's been nominated the Lawyers Barrister of the Week as well. So I think we'll fly into the first question, and I'll probably go through the panelists in the order I introduced them. So question one is, why do you think we need more women in politics? and particularly LGBT+ women, and how can we help them get selected and elected? So Nia.
Well, it's absolutely vital to have more women in politics, because we want to make sure that all of our society is represented, and that many of the issues that women raise also affect men, but it seems to be women that raise them first. In the Labour Party, we had some great controversy when we first brought in the idea of all women shortlists, and we also did something similar when we created the Welsh Assembly. We had twinning, where we put two constituencies together, one to be represented by one by a female as candidates. But there's still a long way to go. So although we've got to 50-50 now in the House of Commons, we need more visibility, I think. And I think that's what one wants to work on now. It's not just about getting women in, it's also about getting members of the LGBT community, and particularly women who are often underrepresented in many sectors of LGBT activity. And I think that visibility is one of the reasons why I've decided to become a lot more active on the issue.
Brilliant. And yeah, thank you for being here, Nia, as well, because that certainly helps bring visibility to the issue. And Christine, next, what do you think we need to do to get more women, and particularly LGBT+ women, into politics?
Oh, hi, welcome everyone. It's a privilege to be here. I think it sounds simple, but we need to work harder. I think we know what needs to be done. We've started doing it. Nia's spoken about what the Labour Party has done. What we did in the Liberal Democrats was we also set up diversity campaigns and gender balance campaigns. And we had the embarrassing situation in 2015 and 16, where all of our MPs and our MSPs in Scotland were all straight white men. And that just wasn't good enough. So we stepped up the campaign, and we had all women shortlists, and we now have a majority of women. The number of elections we've had in the last 3 years did actually help but to change that, but we now have a majority of women in Westminster. We have one woman MSP in Scotland, and the top 4 target seats in Scotland in the coming election are all women. We need to be looking at ourselves, and we need to be checking every single time there is a selection that we haven't overlooked anything, that we're not taking anything for granted. I was very proud of the fact that we had a trans woman in a target seat in the last general election in 2019. Now, unfortunately, she didn't win, but she was a fantastic candidate, and I'm hoping she'll stand again. And she's been very active in the party recently. And the reason it's important is because you cannot call yourself a representative democracy if you're not representative. And if you don't have a balanced parliament, and you don't have a parliament that represents everyone, then you failed. And as a party, you have failed if you haven't done that internally, and you haven't worked to make sure that parliament is representative. So if there is any doubt in anyone's mind that we shouldn't be doing more, then I'm sorry, you have to look at what it is you really want, and what's the sort of society you really want. Do you want one where everybody is represented, or don't you?
Absolutely, thank you, Christine. And coming to Rona next, and Rona, I think I might have tripped over my words. I was trying too heavily to correctly pronounce your constituency. I didn't mention you're the SNP representative as well on our panel, but
that's fine.
Passing over to you, Rona.
Okay, thanks, Emma. Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me today. It really is a privilege, and particularly during LGBT History Month. I very much agree with what Christine was saying, to be honest. All her comments I completely echo. I stood in 2016, and it was an all-woman seat. I see that as a positive move forward. I'll give you some stats about the Scottish Parliament. If you bear with me, it's not too long. So we currently have 47 women MSPs, and 27 of them are in my party. So that's 82 male MSPs and 47 women in Parliament at present. Okay, the May election, the Scottish parliamentary elections coming up in May. So for that election, we have 36 women standing. And that's largely as a result of increasing the number of all-women seats. and 37 men standing. So that's progress. That's 49%. That's a lot better. Our party have also introduced a plan to put BAME and disabled candidates at the top of all our regional lists. You'll know that we have 2 votes in the Scottish parliamentary elections. It doesn't include LGBT candidates at the minute. I mean, despite all the toxic debate that's going on, and we've mentioned it earlier, I mean, we are an inclusive party and we do put diversity at the top of the agenda. And, I think we just have to keep, as Christine said, we just need to keep checking it. We just need to keep on working on it. And actually, I think if organisations feel we're not doing enough, they should tell us. And people at Equality Network we have a great working relationship with them in Parliament, and and they tell us, and we need to act on it. So I think we should always be listening, and we should never think we're doing enough. We should always be doing a bit more.
Thanks, Rona. And moving on to Sue.
Thanks very much for having me today. It's a privilege to be able to share my experience. I think there's no doubt that having women with an LGBT history gives a range of experience that is really valuable in parliamentary terms, but also in other elected representation. And others have said that we need to be representative, and we do. And I'm really pleased that that message has been taken on board by our Prime Minister, who's gave his commitment to see a 50-50 Parliament. It's clear that it's a work in progress, and it certainly is a work in progress in the Conservative Party. And there's a philosophical difference between our party and others. So you're not going to see quotas. That's just against the Conservative philosophy. But we do very much believe in equality of opportunity. And it's been amazing, my journey in the party. And I'm just blown away with some of the things that have happened. And as a trans person, it is just amazing. And I think if I single one thing out of how I believe trans women have something pretty unique to say, and this is recognised in other parts of the world, but for reasons that I don't quite understand, in the way that we are vilified and misunderstood. We have it's called an understanding of both halves. I don't have any testosterone in my body anymore. I'm just full of estrogen. It has reprogrammed my brain, my way of thinking, and I have an understanding of 2 different lives. And that empathy of a woman's way of thinking and a man's way of thinking gives me an insight that is really quite rare. And the ability to be able to bring that to representative government and to life is something pretty special.
Yeah, thank you, Sue, and thanks for sharing that particular insight and personal insight as well. It's really important to bear in mind. And Mandu, coming to you, why do you think we need more women, and particularly LGBT women, in politics?
So yeah, there were 2 parts. There's why and how we do it. And I mean, why, a lot of that has been covered. Very, very simply, we are a representative democracy, and people from different backgrounds are able to bring absent or overlooked perspectives to the table. And that always contributes to better policy making. It contributes to better responses in a crisis, for example, like the one we've been facing for the last year in this country. But the other beautiful thing that happens is that when you have people from backgrounds like mine that are rare in the political landscape, we are actually able to inspire, equip, challenge, potentially demand more and better from those who are overrepresented. Yeah. And I think it's not just about me being there and what I can bring, it is the impact of what different perspectives can actually result in the expansion and broadening of horizons of the people who are more likely to find themselves in the corridors of power. So those are the two things about why. But how? Well, I'm going to say we've got to be bold and we've got to be ambitious. And I'm going to say that, frankly, I'm of the view that the steps that have been taken thus far are too timid and they're too slow. And we do need quotas and we do need affirmative action. And the example I often give to illustrate why this makes sense is something that I learned about what happened in Australian politics. Now, at the beginning of the 90s, the two major parties took different approaches to trying to get more women around the table. At the beginning of the 90s, both parties only had 14% of their MPs were actually women. And the one party, the Labour Party, took an affirmative action approach. Their Conservative Party took a sort of training and networking and mentoring approach. You come to a couple of years ago, the affirmative action approach had yielded 46% of that party's representatives were women, and the other approach only 26%. And in my view, we can't allow a situation where we're saying all we're going to do is like fix the women. We need to fix the system. And if people find it a little bit queasy talking about quotas, how about we experiment with flipping quotas on their head? What about maximum quotas for the groups of people who over the last few hundred years have enjoyed over-representation in Parliament? What about that if people find the idea of quotas in the traditional sense unpalatable for whatever reason? That's one of the things the Women's Equality Party is looking at. And it is bold, it is ambitious, it's not palatable to everybody philosophically, but I don't have 50 years to wait until we correct and get this right. And the nation doesn't have that long. And LGBTQI plus women, we have so much to offer, but our voices are absent. And that does a disservice to everyone. And I'm not prepared to wait for how long it takes to just do it easy breezy, slowly, when there is an alternative, that would yield quicker returns. So I need boldness and I want to see ambition.
Thank you, Mandu. Appreciate it. And moving, I just want to point out Rona is with us. She's just experiencing a bit of technical issues, but she hasn't left the party. So just to get kind of an outside of the political perspective on that, just coming to Robin and why you think that it's so important and how we do it.
Yeah, because I'm the odd one out. I'm not standing for any form of office, but I'm a lawyer in a field that uses Parliament's output. So I practice in an area that's largely statute based. And so if Parliament makes good law, then it makes my and my clients' time easier. And if it makes bad law, then we have to try and sort it out. And we have people trying to find loopholes in it and all the rest of it. So I need Parliament that makes good law. And that is done when you reflect society and when you listen to all the diverse voices that there are. We've had that point made already. Plainly also, I'm a citizen, so I want Parliament properly to hold the executive to account. And once again, you do that with a diverse group of MPs who are prepared to speak out. And I do actually shade into some policy work now and again, and I'm afraid I'm with Mandu, that I think if we're going to make this change, I'm 57, so I've got less time than some of the rest of you left. And if I'm going to see a significant advance, then you have to grab this problem by the scruff of the neck and do something about it.
Thanks, Robert. And coming straight back to you, really, I think whilst we're chatting, I'd like to ask one of our other questions. I think you'd give a really good perspective on this, is how do we address discrimination and prejudice within political parties and indeed within society?
Yeah, and you know, that's my working life. I think I think the first step has to be to make your standards clear. We've seen both major political parties have problems recently, one party with anti-Semitism, one with relationship with the Muslim community particularly. And the first step has to be to have clear standards, and then to have leadership and structures that make sure those standards are followed, and that people who step out of that behaviour are seen not to be meeting the standards of the party and are dealt with. I mean, it's a stitch in nine thing. Once it's known that things will be dealt with properly and appropriately, then there's so much less incentive to step out of that, which doesn't in any way say that there shouldn't be proper, active, vibrant debates about important issues. But take a leaf from the lawyer's book. I do that in court every day, every time I'm arguing about discrimination, really serious, difficult matters with clients, and yet we find appropriate language and appropriate of that debate. And that's what political parties need to do.
That's it. I think that's, yeah, really important. And just coming on to another question we've had submitted prior to the event, it was, I think this would not include you, conversely, Robin, but why and how did you decide to stand for electoral office? Was there a pivotal moment which led you to this path? So let's start, Mandu, with you and work backwards.
You know, there's days where I still ask myself that question. But the truth of it is, if we're going to distill it down, it really comes down to a sense of impatience, frustration, and passion. Also, a belief that, you know, if I and others like me don't kind of put our necks on the line to an extent and break some of the stigmas and taboos that surround, you know, women, particularly women who are not heterosexual women standing for office, who's going to do that? And I also linking back to what I said in my first answer, I actually think it's possible to have a profound effect by just showing up. And that's partly because you're setting an example, you know, that maxim, you can't be what you can't see. Growing up, my sexuality, I'm a bisexual woman, that was, and it still is, shrouded in all sorts of misunderstanding and taboo and stigma. And if, as a teenager, I had seen people who, you know, were able to say loud and proud, this is who they are, and they see no reason why they should be excluded from public office, I think that would have been huge for me when it comes to my morale and my belief in what was possible for me in my life. And my sexuality is part of who I am. It is part of my story. It is part of my humanity. And one of the things I promised myself when I stood for office for the first time and threw myself into politics wholesale was that I refused to wear the fancy dress of a politician, because the best example I can make, the best leadership I can offer is being who I am, bringing my whole self to the ballot paper, bringing my whole self to work. And hopefully, and I'm lucky, I'm in a party and I'm in an environment where I'm very well supported. And hopefully that would translate into the sort of change happening at a quicker rate than we've all acknowledged is moving, but isn't moving quickly enough. And so when it comes to what motivated me, that was really, really fundamental.
Absolutely love that. Thanks, Mandu. And just going to skip through to Rona quickly, because we just want to check that we've got you back now.
Yeah. Apologies. Yeah. Suddenly I just couldn't hear. I could see everybody moving. I just couldn't hear anybody at all. But I've absolutely no idea what happened there. But yes, all good now. Do you want me to answer?
Yes. Yeah, why and how you decided to stand for electoral office?
Yeah, well, I mean, being perfectly honest, it was easy. It was easy for me. I'm a white, straight, middle class, probably privileged woman. So I didn't face the challenges. And I think Mandu's absolutely, you know, said it all, that, you know, you need to be a role model if you want better diversity and representation. And I think for me, it wasn't an issue. I mean, I was working for an MSP at the time. It was an all-women's seat, and I obviously clearly had a passion for politics and the policies of the party I'm in. But you know, that was easy. And I mean, it's other guys on the panel that have had to you know, to take it forward.
Lovely, thanks, Rona, and I'm glad to have you back now as well. So going to Sue, and because Sue, obviously, I read your article recently in Conservative Women, and you were obviously in business for a long time. So what was that pivotal moment for you to stand for electoral office?
I don't know whether you've seen the film Suffragettes, and it opens with the lady sitting down and giving evidence in the select committee, and the similar thing happened to me. I was invited to give evidence to Maria Miller at the transgender inquiry, all to do with how long my initial appointment had been, which was 4 years to go and have my initial appointment with the NHS. And because it was 4 years and that was terrible for me, I decided to go to India for all my gender surgeries. And I was treated amazingly over there, even to the extent of being told I was even semi-divine, would you believe, as they treat transgender people very differently there. And I hasten to add, I'm not semi-divine. And so, but amazing culture, and I was asked to share that experience to the committee. And after the committee, my MP met me in the Commons tea room, and I was having a little bit of a moan about society and giving him my story, and he said, "Sue, the only answer for you is you're going to have to become an MP." And I said, "I can't do that. Nobody will accept me as a trans person." And anyway, 6 months later, I applied to the Conservative Party, and I sat my parliamentary assessment board, and I passed that first time, and I got my full pass to go anywhere in the country. And the only reason I didn't get a seat at the last election was that I was offered one, but unfortunately, a few months before the election, I'd had a massive pulmonary embolism, and I couldn't stand. So, you know, maybe next time, who knows?
We certainly all hope next time, so thanks, Sue. And coming on to Christine. Christine, why and how did you decide to stand? Was there a pivotal moment for you?
It was frustration for me. I had been a journalist for a long time, and I had written about politics, I had written about society, and I'd done interviews with Harriet Harman and various people about the things that they wanted to change, and saw it being not deliberately blocked, but just the hurdles that they had to overcome. And I, when my daughter was at school, decided that I'd kind of had enough of this writing about it from the sidelines and wanted to get involved, but didn't actually want to stand. I was persuaded to do that by Jo Swinson. But I think if there is a pivotal moment, it was when I was teaching journalism at the University of Strathclyde, and I used to take students to court every so often to teach them about court reporting. And we went to court one day, and I hadn't seen the charge sheet before we went in. They were all looking at the charge sheet. I went in, was sitting at the back of the court, and the door opened and the accused was led in, and it was a boy I'd been at school with, at primary school. He'd been a really bright wee boy who was the centre of attention in school. He was just as bright and intelligent as I was, but he hadn't had the support networks that I'd had growing up. We both came from sort of, I don't know, standard Glasgow working class background. And there I was sitting in the court with my degree and my successful career and teaching other people how to do what I had done. And there he was, about 10 yards away, accused with attempted murder. He'd gone into a pub in Dumbarton with a sawn-off shotgun. And the weirdest thing was he turned and he looked and he recognised me as well and smiled. And I thought, oh my God, how different our lives are. And we came from the same background. All that was different was the opportunity that we had had and the support that we'd had. And I think about that a lot because I see people all around me who have had the same opportunities in life as I have, but I also see people who are daily denied those opportunities. And that was my motivation. And when, as you say, Joe persuaded me, but it was after the meeting I'd had with her and I went away and I thought about it and I thought, do you know what? I've been lucky, but there are people out there who haven't been, and they need those of us who have been lucky to do something about it. So I think that was probably my motivation. And if there's a thing I ever think about why I'm in politics, it's that moment. And thinking back to when I was at primary school and how different my life could have been if I hadn't had the support and the opportunities. So
that's really incredibly powerful, Christine, and yeah, thank you for sharing that moment. Thanks. And Nia, finally moving on to you. What was the moment for you, or perhaps the collection of moments that led to you standing for electoral office?
Yes, indeed. But if I could just comment very quickly on what Mandu said about Australia. Those figures are absolutely replicated in the House of Commons, where Labour's at 50-50 women and men, but the Conservatives are less than 25%. And it sort of really proves the point, doesn't it, that affirmative action is really, really needed. And in terms of my own background, I was very much involved in student community action, and it was seeing the difference that you could make if you changed the system. There's no good putting the sticking plaster on and dealing with the symptoms. And that for me was what really, really mattered. And so that's how I then, when I got settled in the job, became involved in the local Labour Party, local council work, very much writing the sorts of policies that we wanted to put into action and backing up other candidates, and eventually standing for a small local council myself. And after I'd come out in the 1990s, I was quite afraid that standing as a team of councillors in a multi-councillor ward, that could be something that would be hard for my fellow candidates, but they were fantastic, I have to say. My fellow Labour candidates were great, and I was never made to feel that that would hold them back. When it came to 2005 and I had the opportunity to stand for Parliament, I just always said to myself, well, if people ask direct questions, I will answer absolutely directly. I'm not going to hide anything or try and avoid the question. I think it's just very, very important. But I was also very conscious that I didn't want to just be labelled as my really good friend Chris Bryant, MP for the Rhondda, is sometimes labelled in Wales as the gay MP, because he was one of the first in Wales, and only ever seen as able to talk about that particular topic, if you like. So I think it's very, very important that we try and do both, that we try and be as open as we can. We make sure that we stand up and obviously do events like this, but also far more importantly, talking to the less willing as well, if you like. And I think where we have seen huge progress, if you look back to the 1970s, is in the trade union movement. Back in the 70s, I mean, we used to go around with our badges, a woman's place is in her union, because we were desperately trying to make any progress at all. But over the years, they have become much more LGBT friendly places. And that is a really strong training ground for many of our candidates, that they get involved in representing other people, either just advocating on a simple one-to-one basis, or also in training programs. And that does help, but it's got to be that action through and through. And that was very much my route. It was dealing with local problems in the community and wanting to change systems to make things better that got me involved.
Absolutely, thank you, Nia. And we get to that point where there's still a lot of questions we've got here, and they're all very important ones, but obviously time seems to run away on what is always very interesting events, and today's no different. But moving on to the next question we have, and I'm going to come first to Robin, because I think you'll give a unique perspective on this, and this is a really important question someone's asked actually, is how do you protect LGBT plus candidates from abuse and violence? And I think that's particularly important because, you know, there's often that hard skin in politics that people sometimes think they have to accept more than perhaps they legally should. Maybe you can advise, Robin.
Yeah, I think there's no mystery about this. I think it's exactly the same as LGBT people in the workplace or indeed in the union. We've heard a mention of it already. I think there's got to be leadership for. It's so powerful to have a non-LGBT leader, for example, support a particular group, and because sometimes there can be a view that you know, black issues are only for black people, and gay issues are only for gay people, and women's issues are only for women to deal with, and that's plainly wrong. We're all part of the same society, and the way you protect people of any minority group and encourage them and bring them forward is that they're seen to be supported by the whole group. And that's the trick. Once you've achieved that, then people who would attack, who would treat people inappropriately, know that that's inappropriate behaviour. And we now have 9 protected characteristics. We've worked through those over the years. And we seem to have to learn the lesson again and again with each protected characteristic. But actually the answer's straightforward, and it's the one I've given.
Perfect, thanks, Robin. And quickly moving through party representatives, I think more as well, what do your parties do to protect them? I think is interesting. So Nia, if you start with yourself.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we've had huge debates, and the issue about anti-Semitism was mentioned earlier, and you know, there is absolutely no place for any form of prejudice or discrimination, and we've got to make that absolutely clear and have absolutely clear leadership on it. So you know the battle we've had on that, and you know the stance we've taken on that. But the same is very much true, as Robin has said, leadership from what sometimes people call allies. In other words, people who are not LGBT themselves, but who will stand up for us and will take a lead. It does help having elected representatives, but it also helps having strong leadership, but also active groups within the party. So we have an LGBT officer now in every constituency. We also have a very strong LGBT Labour section as well, in order to try to make sure that the support is there, information is there, and that we don't forget the issue, because otherwise it's like so many other things. There are so many priorities, it could easily become forgotten. So I do really believe that you need those structures in as well, so that you don't slip back and so you don't forget. And, you know, for me, it's about making progress. I'm not happy unless we're moving forward. We don't want to stand still. We need to move forward.
Thanks, Nia. And Sue, from the Conservative Party's perspective, I suppose, how does the party protect candidates? Or how should we protect? How should they protect candidates?
So, in terms of the code of conduct, it's very clear. All the protected characteristics are built into the code of conduct, and it's very much like all the other party codes of conduct. So there's an independent complaints process, and it's just been enhanced after the independent review that went off in connection with the Islamophobic review. So it's been enhanced for that. In terms of the wider point, I think there are some things that could be done both legislatively and in the media. For me at the moment, the incitement laws don't cover gender identity. They do cover sexual orientation, but they could be extended to cover gender identity. And I think the editor's code in the for the media is woefully deficient, and that's why we are seeing what we are around. For the last 3 years, it's just been awful against transgender people, but you don't see it against the wider LGBT folk, and that's because the editor's code is different, and those two things could make a huge difference. And my general advice would be just don't engage with the hate, report it and block it, and move on.
Thanks. And Christine, from the Lib Dems perspective, and also, yes, bringing on to that point that I think Sue was raising, and how do you advise women within your party to handle or cope with the online abuse?
Actually, that the last point Sue made is a very good one. Don't engage. Don't get involved. Don't engage with it. It applies to all sorts of abuse. Which I'm sure we've all had for different reasons and on different scales. We've all had at one point or another. And as soon as you engage, then it becomes more of a problem. I don't mean ignore it, because you can't afford to ignore it. You have to be aware that it's there and do everything you can to fight it. Within the party, like Nia said, leadership is important. The leadership the elected representatives have to make a stand and have to make it clear what the party thinks about LGBT issues. Like other parties, we've had issues with this in the past, but I think we have things like, a place in the federal board for the LGBT group. We have groups within the party, as I'm sure the other parties do. But the big thing is talking about it, making sure the leadership are aware and promoting issues all the time, and that we all take responsibility for making sure that nobody in the party, for any reason, if they have a protected characteristic, whatever that protected characteristic is, that they are protected by the party and they feel safe. And the safeguarding and the security within the party has to be good. And we all have to feel comfortable that we will be protected is the first thing. And if someone doesn't feel comfortable, it's important that political parties and organisations know about it and do something about it. And if they're being made to feel uncomfortable by anyone from within that party, then the disciplinary processes, etc., have to work and have to be rigorous. And you have to protect everyone within the party from abuse, because very often the problem is not from outside an organisation, it's within the organisation.
Thanks, Christine. And Rona, your perspective on that, especially perhaps, is there a different difference in Hollywood in the protections or amount of abuse, perhaps?
Okay. Well, I mean, firstly, we have very strong leadership on this. You're probably aware, the First Minister is very, very, inclusive and always wants to promote that. We're introducing the Gender Reform Act. We've got a hate crime bill going through right at the minute. We've got an equality officer, an LGBT officer on the National Executive Committee. We have them within branches. And as I said earlier, we work really closely with organisations like Equality Network and Engender and others, and we work in tandem. I mean, I think I just think the current debate is just awful, frankly, and it's just not conducive to minority groups and women standing. But I mean, as others have said, I mean, the best way is to ignore, try and rise above it, and not allow bigots really to sort of destroy the narrative and to sort of damage the progress that's been made by everyone, really, and particularly minority groups, to get us to where we are. And I think that's the thing. It's just it's difficult, and I think women and minority groups entering politics, they will be aware of this. And I've been quite lucky. I've not had an awful lot of experience of abuse online, but I know that so many colleagues have. But it's not healthy, and I am an optimist, and I think that it will go away eventually. We're going through a particularly bad bit time just now, but I think eventually the good will come out. Yeah.
Thanks, Rona. And Mandu, finally, the Women's Equality Party and yourself, how would you advise women, and how does your party protect LGBT plus candidates?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things. I can echo some of the stuff that's been said about leadership. I'm really proud of this. We have the most diverse leadership team across politics in the UK, our top leadership team. There's me and my 3 deputy leaders. We're a bit short of men, I'll be honest, when it comes to representation. But 3 out of 4 of us are members of the LGBTQI community. We all talk openly about our experiences, including, both the positive and the negative. And I think something that's been alluded to so far in the other answers that have been given is that you've got to set clear red lines. You've got to be very, very upfront and unambiguous about what is acceptable and have zero tolerance when those red lines are crossed. So that's sort of step number 1. But, and this is where it gets tricky, because there's a balancing act that has to be taken care of, in my view, if you're going to create enduring change and environments where everybody is welcome. You do have to work proactively to create a culture in your organization, whether it's a political party or a law firm, doesn't matter actually, where empathy and compassion prevail, right? And where progress, evolution, learning, and greater understanding is the trajectory you're always on. And this may feel controversial to some people, but I personally feel that the magic actually happens when people shed their prejudices. But it is impossible for people to shed their prejudices, in my view and in my experience, without dialogue. And this echoes something that Robin has actually mentioned earlier on in this session. And so in addition to your red lines and your leadership and your zero tolerance, the balancing act is creating spaces and environments where people who are marginalized feel safe and protected. And we as a party are on a journey towards creating caucuses where different groups of people convene and come together. They are safe spaces. We are working towards formalizing them and giving them power on our national executives, but they're also environments where talent can be identified and nurtured and where people can be supported and encouraged. We have an LGBTQI caucus that's under construction at the moment, alongside a couple of other caucuses for other protected characteristics that are also under construction. But this dialogue point is really, really key. And I will say straight up that I do not think social media is the place for the kind of productive dialogue that creates the evolution and greater understanding that we all need to see. So our institutions have a job to do, and those of us in leadership positions have a responsibility to doing things that feel like they're in tension with one another, towing a firm line when you need to, but being deliberate about allowing space for people to learn, for people to empathize with one another and evolve. I mean, the data that looks at society more broadly tells us that this is possible. In 1988, 75% of the British public were of the view that homosexuality was always or mostly wrong. Yeah. 2012, several years down the line, only 28% of the British public held that view. Now, evolution and progress does take effort, and unfortunately, it does take strategic patience. And so our institutions are microcosms of society. So those of us in leadership positions actually have an almost impossible task, it feels like at times, to get the balance right. But there are several elements to it. And I firmly believe it's possible. I wouldn't be sitting here if I didn't believe, as Rona suggested, that improvement is on the horizon for us, but it's not going to happen just by accident. We're going to have to work for it, and we've got to protect the people who are worst affected in the meantime.
Amazing. Yeah, and it's great statistics, so kind of depressing. There's still 28% of people that feel that way. Look, we've got one final question I've got here that's submitted. So what I'll ask for on this question is a 1-sentence answer from everyone, because I would like to hopefully try and answer one live question at least. But so we've got, and to be honest, I'd like it in 1 sentence. I think this could be done in 1 word, not to sound too biased. But how can we ever achieve equal representation when backbenchers still aren't entitled to paid maternity or parental leave? So starting with you, Nia, please.
Well, at least we've now got the principle of proxy votes. So that is a start. And I think the ministerial bill that went through last week, again, is another step. So let's open the door properly now and make sure that we have exactly the same sorts of employment rights in respect of maternity that we would expect in any other self-respecting profession.
Absolutely, and you're right to highlight those recent successes in the right direction, Nia. And Christine.
We have to stop thinking maternity leave is vital. And I agree with Nia, but we missed an opportunity. The fact that it only applies to ministers isn't good enough. And we're never going to have an equal playing field until we stop thinking about parental responsibility as only being for women. Because as long as we do that, then employers will see women as the ones who will take leave and therefore employ the men. So that's the thing we have to do. And the only way it's going to work at Parliament is if we start leading by example and have the right legislation in place. It took 2 years to get proxy voting, but as Nia says, we've now got it and we need to keep working on that. And it's that L word again, leadership. Parliament needs to lead on it.
Yeah. Absolutely. And Robin.
Well, if barristers' chambers with weird structures that we have and the odd structure of being a group of self-employed people working together, if we can solve the maternity and paternity problems, and we have, then it should be straightforward for an organisation like Parliament.
Thanks, Robin. And Mandu.
I think this is one of those areas where we should have a red line and zero tolerance. And, you know, no one's starting at ground zero here. I can send a copy of the Women's Equality Party Manifesto, which sets out exactly what the ingredients are to eliminate this problem and make it so that it is no longer a barrier to the world we all want to see, where men and women are truly equal citizens. We have got the prescription for this. There is no excuse any longer for this to prevail.
Thank you. And Rona, and also interestingly, if you could give the perspective for MSPs, I'll be honest and say I'm not sure what the situation is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a bit shocked actually to hear what I didn't realise in Westminster that was the situation. In Scottish Parliament, it's a bit different. We do have paid maternity leave. We have parental leave, 2 weeks parental leave. That obviously clearly needs to be raised. But I mean, one of my caseworkers is now on his second period of adoption leave. He and his husband adopted a little boy, and then, you know, a year later decided to adopt the little boy's sibling. And so he's been on full pay and adoption leave for, about 3 years or something. So we actually do have, we do actually have fair, not to say it couldn't be improved, of course, but we do have quite fair terms.
Yeah. That's amazing to hear, and for any Scottish women on the call, I hope that inspires even further to see the help that's already on hand. And finally, coming to Sue.
I was a partner in PwC for decades, and similarly, the MPs are self-employed, and we cracked this decades ago. And so it's wider than just maternity and paternity. There's a whole raft of employment-related benefits that just need sorting and bringing into the 21st century. And as legislators, why you can't get it cracked is just thoroughly beyond me. And I think people in the country just look at you and think it's bizarre.
Thanks. And I'm so sorry, because we are going to have to skip the live questions. And honestly, it's been such an interesting panel. I feel like we've, as always is the case, we've barely begun to scratch the surface of what we could tackle. But I hope it has helped some. So I am going to have to say thank you for the panelists and go to wrap up. And I'm really sorry we couldn't get to those live questions, but we did get into a lot of meat there in the last hour. So just to wrap up, to say we urge all women who want to take the next step into political life to sign up to Stand via our website. You can click the Stand Up to Sign button, and we have that supportive network Francis outlined earlier that's there to help you from day one. If anyone, any of you know women and LGBT+ women who would make a great representative, please ask them to stand as well. If you like the work that 50/50 does and want to help us build a better democracy, you can join or even donate and become a friend of 50/50 via the website. And then the big thank you to our tech expert, Hannah, who's been on hand making things go smoothly and has done a great job behind the scenes there, organising and running the event. So thanks, Hannah. And obviously a big thank you to our wonderful panel. You're all extremely inspirational, and I'm so pleased that you gave up some of your Sunday afternoon to be with us. A big thanks to the audience, and that's a massive audience we've had join us again, so thank you for giving up some of your Sunday to join us as well. Massively grateful. And of course to our sponsors, Equal Power Coalition, backed by Comic Relief. So will stay live for another 5 minutes in order to allow people to complete the survey that will pop up after this session closes, and ask you, will you ask a woman to stand, and to ask you if you've been inspired by the event, and to give us some feedback about bits you enjoyed, bits you didn't. Hopefully not too many that you didn't, but yeah, just to say a massive thank you again to everyone that's made this a really special event this Sunday. I'm so grateful, so thank you.
And thank you, Emma. Great, really good event. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.